The couch was old, older than most things in the house. Its faded green fabric worn thin by decades of use. It sat in the corner of the living room, tucked against a wall that hadn't seen fresh paint since the Reagan administration. To Evelyn Harper, it was more than furniture. It was a time capsule. She could still feel the weight of her children's small bodies curled against her on that couch, their laughter echoing as she read bedtime stories. She could still see her husband, George, sinking into it after a long day, his calloused hands resting on hers. But now, at 72, Evelyn was told the couch was her room. "You're fine there, Mom," her daughter-in-law, Claire, had said 2 months ago. Her voice clipped, as if Evelyn were a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. "The kids need the upstairs rooms, and we're turning your old bedroom into a home office. It's just practical." Practical. The word stung like a paper cut. Evelyn's son, Michael, hadn't even looked up from his phone when Claire spoke. He just nodded, his silence louder than any agreement. Evelyn had raised Michael in this house, cooked countless dinners in its kitchen, and nursed George through his final days in their bed. Now, her world was reduced to a couch, one they wouldn't even let her move to a proper room. She sat there now, her hands folded in her lap, staring at the living room that no longer felt like hers. The walls were adorned with Claire's minimalist art prints, the kind that looked like they belonged in a sterile gallery. The old family photos, black and white snapshots of Evelyn and George on their wedding day. Michael's first bike ride were gone, replaced by sleek frames showcasing Claire's yoga retreats and the kids' soccer trophies. Evelyn's life had been erased, piece by piece, and she hadn't even noticed until it was nearly gone. The house was alive with noise, Claire shouting at the kids to finish their homework, Michael's podcast blaring from the kitchen, the hum of the new espresso machine Claire insisted they needed. Evelyn's fingers traced the armrest of the couch, feeling the familiar tear where Michael, at 6, had spilled grape juice and cried for an hour, thinking he'd ruined everything. She hadn't scolded him then. She just hugged him, promising they'd fix it together. Now, that same boy, 42, graying at the temples, treated her like a burden. She wasn't supposed to hear the argument last night, but the walls were thin. Claire's voice had been sharp, slicing through the late-night quiet. "She's not contributing, Michael. She just sits there, taking up space. We could rent out the house if she wasn't here. Make real money." Michael's response was softer, but no less cutting. "What do you want me to do? She's my mom. We can't just kick her out. Can't just kick her out." As if she were a stray dog they'd reluctantly taken in. Evelyn's chest tightened, but she didn't cry. She hadn't cried since George's funeral 5 years ago. Instead, she'd learned to swallow her pain, to let it settle like sediment at the bottom of her heart. But last night, something shifted. The sediment stirred, and a quiet resolve began to form. Morning light spilled through the living room window, casting long shadows across the couch. Evelyn stood slowly, her knees protesting, and walked to the small wooden box on the side table, her one possession Claire hadn't relegated to storage. Inside were George's old papers, the deed to the house, their marriage certificate, a few love letters he'd written her during his army days. She lifted the deed, its edges yellowed but intact. The house was still in her name. George had insisted on it, even when Michael and Claire moved in after his death, claiming they'd help her out. Help. Another word that had lost its meaning. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the couch, then to the deed, then to the front door. She'd spent 50 years in this house, pouring her soul into every corner. It wasn't just a building, it was her history, her love, her grief. And they'd reduced it to a couch. A spark of defiance flared in her chest, small but fierce. If the couch was her room, then the house was hers to reclaim. She didn't have a plan. Not yet. But as she tucked the deed back into the box, her fingers lingered on the paper, and a thought took root. It was reckless, absurd even, but it felt right. She'd spent her life giving her time, her love, her home. Maybe it was time to take something back. By noon, Evelyn was in the kitchen, making tea in the chipped mug George had bought her at a flea market. Claire breezed in, her yoga mat slung over her shoulder. "Mom, can you watch the kids this afternoon? I've got a class, and Michael's got a work call." She didn't wait for an answer. Already halfway out the door, Evelyn sipped her tea, her voice steady. "I've got plans. Claire." Claire stopped, her perfectly arched brows rising. "Plans? What plans?" "Just plans," Evelyn said, her tone calm but unyielding. For the first time in months, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in Claire's eyes. It was enough to fan that spark of defiance into a flame. That afternoon, Evelyn walked to the local library, her steps slow but purposeful. The librarian, a kind woman named Susan who'd known Evelyn for decades, greeted her warmly. "Haven't seen you in a while. Evie, everything okay?" Evelyn smiled, the deed tucked in her purse. "I need to look up some real estate laws, Susan, and maybe a phone number for a good lawyer." Susan's eyes widened, but she didn't press. Instead, she led Evelyn to a computer and pulled up the resources she needed. By the time Evelyn left, she had a name: Margaret Klein, a real estate attorney with a reputation for being fierce in a plan that was starting to feel less like a whim and more like a necessity. The walk home was colder, the autumn air biting at her knuckles, but Evelyn felt warmer than she had in years. She passed the house, its windows glowing with the life she'd built. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she belonged to it anymore. The couch wasn't her room. It never had been. And by sunset, she'd make sure they all understood that. Margaret Klein's office was a small, cluttered space above a bakery, the air thick with the scent of fresh bread. Evelyn sat across from her, the deed laid out on the desk like a battle map. Margaret, a wiry woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, scanned the document, her pen tapping rhythmically against a coffee mug. "You're sure about this?" Margaret asked, leaning back in her chair. "Selling a house this fast, especially one you've lived in for 50 years, it's not something most people do on a whim." "It's not a whim," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "It's mine, and I want it gone. Today, if possible." Margaret raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. She'd seen enough clients to know when someone's mind was made up. "All right. The deed's clean, and the market's hot. I know a real estate agent who can move fast cash buyers. No contingencies. You could have an offer by tonight." "But Evelyn, where will you go?" Evelyn hadn't thought that far ahead. The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. She pictured the couch, Claire's dismissive tone, Michael's averted eyes. "Anywhere but there," she said finally. Margaret nodded, jotting down notes. "I'll make some calls. We can list it this afternoon, but you'll need to tell your family. Legally, you don't owe them notice." "But," she trailed off, letting the implication linger. Evelyn's stomach twisted. Telling Michael and Claire meant facing their shock, their anger, maybe even their tears. But she remembered last night's argument, the way they talked about her like she was a piece of furniture to be rearranged. She nodded. "I'll tell them." By 3 o'clock, the house was listed. The agent, a brisk woman named Carla, had taken photos while Evelyn stood in the backyard, pretending to prune the rose bushes George had planted. She didn't want to be inside when Carla snapped pictures of the living room, the couch in its corner like a silent accusation. The listing went live on a real estate site, and within an hour, Carla called with 2 cash offers, both above asking price. Evelyn chose the higher-only developer looking to flip the house into condos. Closing could happen in days. Evelyn returned home to a quiet house. Claire was still at her yoga class. The kids at school. Michael at work. She sat on the couch, the deed in her lap, and waited. The clock ticked toward 5, each second amplifying the weight of what she'd done. She wasn't just selling a house, she was dismantling the life she'd built, brick by brick. But it wasn't her life anymore. Not really. It belonged to Claire's art prints, Michael's podcasts, the kids' endless screen time. She was a ghost in her own home, and ghosts didn't need rooms. When the front door opened, Claire's voice cut through the silence. "Mom, why is there a for sale sign in the yard?" Her tone was sharp, accusing, as if Evelyn had committed a crime. Evelyn stood, smoothing her cardigan. "Because I sold the house." Claire froze, her yoga mat slipping to the floor. "You what?" "It's mine," Evelyn said, holding up the deed. "George and I paid for it, raised Michael in it. You told me the couch was my room, so I figured I didn't need the rest." Claire's face flushed, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You can't just do that. Where are we supposed to go? This is our home." "Your home." Evelyn's voice was soft but unyielding. "You made it clear it's not mine anymore." Michael walked in then, his briefcase still in hand. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes darting between his mother and his wife. Evelyn met his gaze, searching for the boy who'd spilled grape juice on the couch. But all she saw was a man who'd let her become invisible. "I sold the house, Michael. The deal closes in 3 days. You'll need to find somewhere else." Michael's jaw dropped. "Mom, you can't be serious. This is crazy." "Is it?" Evelyn asked. "You let Claire decide I belong on a couch. You didn't say a word. So I made my own decision." Claire's voice rose to a shriek. "You're punishing us. You're leaving us homeless." Evelyn shook her head. "I'm not punishing you. I'm setting myself free." The argument that followed was loud, messy, tearful. Claire accused Evelyn of betrayal. Michael pleaded, then yelled, then pleaded again. The kids, home from school, hovered in the doorway, confused and scared. Evelyn stood firm, her heart aching but resolute. She'd given them everything: her home, her love, her patience. They'd taken it all and given her a couch in return. By 6, the house felt like a battlefield. Evelyn packed a small suitcase, clothes, the wooden box, a photo of Georgianne, called a cab. As she stepped outside, the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the "for sale" sign glowing in the fading light. She didn't look back as the cab pulled away, but she could hear Claire's voice, still shouting, fading into the distance. The cab dropped her at a small motel on the edge of town. The room was plain, the bed stiff, but it was hers. For the first time in months, Evelyn slept without the weight of someone else's life pressing down on her. She dreamed of George, his laugh, the way he'd always said, "Evie, you're tougher than you think." Maybe he was right. The motel room was a far cry from the house Evelyn had called home for half a century. The walls were a faded beige, the carpet worn but clean, and the single window overlooked a parking lot where a flickering street lamp buzzed softly. Yet, as Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, her suitcase open beside her, She felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't comfort. Not yet. But it was freedom, a freedom she hadn't known she'd lost until she reclaimed it. She opened the wooden box, pulling out George's love letters. His handwriting, slanted and deliberate, brought a lump to her throat. Evie, you're my home, no matter where we are. He'd written in 1973, when he was stationed overseas. She'd clung to those words through every hardship, the lean years, the miscarriages before Michael, the long nights of worry. Now, they felt like a reminder. Home wasn't a place. It was something you carried inside. The next morning, Evelyn woke early, the weight of her decision settling in. Selling the house wasn't just an act of defiance. It was a leap into the unknown. She had money coming enough to start over, but no plan beyond that. At 72, starting over felt like trying to plant a tree in winter. Still, she dressed carefully, choosing a navy blouse and her best slacks, and headed to the diner across the street. The diner was a relic, much like Evelyn herself, with checkered floors and booths that smelled faintly of coffee and grease. She ordered pancakes and tea, savoring the small act of choosing for herself. The waitress, a young woman with a nose ring and a kind smile, chatted with her about the weather, the town, the way things used to be. Evelyn hadn't realized how much she'd missed simple conversation, the kind that didn't come with expectations or judgment. Her phone buzzed in her purse, Michael's name flashing on the screen. She let it go to voicemail. He'd left 3 messages since last night, each one angrier than the last. But she wasn't ready to hear him out. Not yet. Instead, she called Margaret Klein, who confirmed the sale was moving forward. The buyers had wired a deposit, and the closing was set for tomorrow. Evelyn would have enough to buy a small condo, maybe even travel a little, something she and George had always dreamed of but never done. "What about your family?" Margaret asked, her tone gentle but probing. "They're calling me, too. You know, pretty upset." "Let them be upset," Evelyn said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "They'll figure it out." She spent the day wandering the town, revisiting places she hadn't seen in years. The park where she'd pushed Michael on the swings. The bookstore where she and George used to browse on Saturday mornings. The cemetery where George rested. She sat by his grave for an hour, telling him everything, not just about the house, but about the ache in her heart, the fear of what came next, the spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. "I did it, George," she whispered, tracing his name on the headstone. "I took it back. I hope you're proud." That evening, back at the motel, Evelyn sat down with a notebook she'd bought at the bookstore. She started writing. Not a plan, but a list of things she wanted to do, places she wanted to see, dreams she'd buried under years of duty. Paris, maybe, to see the Eiffel Tower George had always talked about. A cooking class, because she'd always wanted to make croissants from scratch. A book club, to talk about stories with people who didn't see her as a burden. The list grew, filling 2 pages, then 3. Each item felt like a small rebellion, a reclaiming of the life she'd let slip away. She was halfway through writing Learn to Paint when her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from her granddaughter. "Lily, just 12 years old, Grandma. Where are you? Mom's really mad, but I miss you." Evelyn's heart softened. Lily was the one bright spot in that house, always sneaking onto the couch with her to watch old movies or ask about the past. She typed a reply, "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just needed some space. I'll see you soon. I promise." She didn't know how she'd keep that promise, but she meant it. Lily wasn't like Claire or even Michael. She saw Evelyn, really saw her, and that was worth holding on to. The next morning, Evelyn met Margaret at the title office to sign the papers. The process was quick, almost anticlimactic. A few signatures, a handshake, and the house was gone. Evelyn felt a pang as she handed over the keys. But it wasn't regret. It was the ache of letting go, of closing a chapter she'd thought would last forever. As she left the office, her phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Michael. This time, she listened. His voice was softer, strained. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Can we talk? Please?" Evelyn stood on the sidewalk, the autumn wind tugging at her scarf. She wanted to forgive him, to run back to the boy who'd cried over grape juice. But she wasn't ready. Not yet. She slipped the phone back into her purse and kept walking, toward a future she couldn't yet see but was determined to find. The money from the house sale hit Evelyn's account the next day. A number so large it felt unreal, like something from a dream she didn't dare trust. She sat in the diner again, her notebook open, the list of dreams now spilling onto a fourth page. The waitress, whose name tag read Tina, noticed the notebook and grinned. Planning a big adventure. Huh. Something like that, Evelyn said, her smile small but genuine. Maybe Paris. Tina's eyes lit up. Paris? Oh, you gotta go. My cousin went last year. Said it's like stepping into a painting. Evelyn nodded, the idea of Paris growing more vivid in her mind. She'd never traveled farther than Florida, and even that was decades ago. A family trip to Disney World when Michael was 10. She remembered George's laugh as they rode the teacups, Michael's wide-eyed wonder. The memory was sweet, but it carried a shadow. Those days were gone, and she couldn't keep living in their echo. She spent the morning at a local bank, opening a new account to keep the money safe. The banker, a young man with a too-tight tie, asked if she wanted to invest. You could grow this, Mrs. Harper. Real estate's still hot. Or maybe some stocks. Evelyn shook her head. I'm not looking to grow it. I'm looking to live it. He didn't understand. But that was okay. She didn't need him to. By noon, she'd rented a small apartment in town. A one-bedroom with a sunny balcony and a view of the park. It wasn't fancy, but it had a bed, a table, a chair, her own space. She signed the lease with a steady hand, her signature a quiet declaration of independence. Moving in took less than an hour. Her suitcase held everything she'd brought from the house, and she didn't need more. Not yet. She placed George's wooden box on the table, the photo of him beside it. The apartment felt empty, but it was a good kind of empty room to grow, to breathe, to be. That afternoon, she walked to the bookstore again, this time to buy a travel guide for Paris. The clerk, an older man who reminded her of George with his gentle smile, recommended a few others: Italy, Greece, even Japan. You're never too old to see the world, he said, and Evelyn believed him. Her phone stayed quiet most of the day, but as evening fell, another text from Lily arrived. Grandma, Mom says we're moving to an apartment. It's small. Are you coming back? Evelyn's fingers hovered over the screen. She wanted to see Lily, to hug her and tell her everything would be okay. But she couldn't go back to that house, even if it was still standing. She replied, I've got my own place now. Lily, come visit soon. Okay. I'll make cookies. The reply came instantly. Chocolate chip. Promise. Evelyn laughed, the sound surprising her. Promise. That night, she sat on her balcony, a cup of tea in her hands, watching the town settle into dusk. The park across the street was alive with families, kids chasing each other, couples walking hand in hand. She felt a pang of loneliness, But it was different from the kind she'd felt on the couch. That loneliness had been suffocating, trapped in a house that no longer wanted her. This was softer, a loneliness that left room for possibility. The next day, Evelyn enrolled in a cooking class at the community center. It wasn't croissants yet, but a beginner's baking course. Something to start with. The instructor, a cheerful woman named Rosa, welcomed her like an old friend. The class was small, mostly retirees like Evelyn, and for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere. As she kneaded dough, her hands remembering the rhythm from years of making bread for George and Michael, Rosa asked about her story. Evelyn hesitated, then shared a piece of the couch, the house, the sale. The others listened, their eyes wide, some nodding in quiet understanding. "You're brave," Rosa said, her voice warm. "Not everyone has the guts to start over like that." Evelyn didn't feel brave. Not really. She felt like a woman who'd run out of options and chosen the only one left. But Rosa's words stayed with her, a small seed of pride taking root. By the end of the week, Evelyn had settled into a routine. Mornings at the diner, afternoons at the bookstore or the park, evenings in her apartment, planning her next steps. She bought a plane ticket to Paris for next month, her first ever international flight. The thought made her stomach flutter, but it was a good kind of fear, the kind that came with growth. Michael called again, leaving another voicemail. His tone was different now, less angry, more desperate. "Mom, I messed up. I should have stood up for you. Can we meet? Please." Evelyn listened to the message 3 times, her heart torn. She loved Michael, always would, but love didn't mean erasing herself. She needed time, and so did he. She didn't call back, but she saved the message. A small bridge she wasn't ready to cross, but wasn't ready to burn either. As she closed her notebook that night, adding "visit the Louvre" to her list, Evelyn felt something she hadn't in years: hope. It was fragile, like a seedling pushing through cracked earth, but it was there. And for now, that was enough. Evelyn's apartment began to feel like a home, piece by piece. She bought a small rug for the living room, its deep blue threads reminding her of the ocean she'd never seen up close. A set of dishes, simple but sturdy, filled the kitchen cabinets. A potted plant, a gift from Rosa after their second baking class, sat on the balcony, its leaves catching the morning sun. Each addition was a choice, a stitch in the new life she was sewing together. Her days were full now, not with the chaos of Claire's household, but with quiet purpose. She joined a book club at the bookstore, where she debated Jane Austen with a retired teacher named Helen and laughed over coffee with a widower named Carl, who had a knack for storytelling. She baked bread for her neighbors, an elderly couple who invited her for tea and shared stories of their own. She even signed up for a painting class, her first attempt at watercolors shaky but satisfying. But Michael's voicemails lingered in her mind, a persistent ache. He called every few days, each message shorter, sadder. "Mom, I know I screwed up. I want to make this right. Lily misses you. I miss you." She listened to them all, saving each one, but she hadn't replied. Not out of anger, she wasn't angry anymore, but because she needed to know who she was without the weight of their expectations. Lily's texts were different. Bright spots in her day. "Grandma, I got an A in history. Or can I come over soon? Mom's still mad, but I don't care." Evelyn responded to every one, promising cookies and movie nights. But she kept her distance from Claire and Michael. She wasn't ready to face them, not until she was sure of her own strength. A week before her Paris trip, Evelyn sat in the diner, her travel guide open to a map of the Marais district. Tina, the waitress, leaned over. pointing to a spot. You gotta try the falafel there. Best in the city, my cousin says. Evelyn smiled, circling the recommendation. You're gonna have me eating my way through Paris. Tina. Good. Tina laughed. You deserve it. As Evelyn sipped her tea, the diner's door chimed, and Lily walked in, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Evelyn's heart leapt. She hadn't expected her granddaughter. Not today. Lily spotted her and ran over, throwing her arms around Evelyn's neck. Grandma, I told Mom I was going to the library, but I came here instead. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, but there was a shadow there, too. A worry Evelyn recognized. Sneaking out. Huh? Evelyn teased, smoothing Lily's hair. What's going on, sweetheart? Lily slid into the booth, her voice low. Mom and Dad are fighting all the time now. About the house. About you. About everything. I wanted to see you. Evelyn's chest tightened. She'd known her decision would ripple, but hearing it from Lily made it real. I'm sorry it's been hard. Lily. I didn't want that. It's not your fault, Lily said fiercely. Mom was mean to you. Dad, too. I heard them. They shouldn't have made you sleep on the couch. Evelyn reached across the table, squeezing Lily's hand. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Big ones. But I'm okay now. I've got my own place. And I'm going to Paris soon. Lily's eyes widened. Paris? Like France. That's so cool. They spent the afternoon together, sharing pancakes and flipping through the travel guide. Lily asked 100 questions about the Eiffel Tower, French food, whether Evelyn would learn to speak French. For the first time in months, Evelyn felt like a grandmother again, not a burden. When it was time for Lily to go, Evelyn walked her to the bus stop. You tell your mom you were with me. Okay. No more sneaking. Lily nodded, hugging her tightly. I love you, Grandma. Don't forget my cookies. Never, Evelyn promised, watching as the bus carried Lily away. That night, Evelyn called Margaret Klein, asking for advice. I want to set up something for Lily. A trust. Maybe. For college or whatever she needs. From the house money. Margaret was quiet for a moment, then said, That's generous. Evelyn, I'll get the paperwork started. But what about your son? You thinking of leaving him anything? Evelyn hesitated. Not yet. Maybe someday. The next day, she went to her painting class. Her canvas filled with bold strokes of blue and golden abstract take on the Paris skyline. Or at least her imagining of it. Carl, the widower from book club, sat beside her, his own painting a mess of greens and browns. You're a natural, he said, grinning. Me? I'm just here for the coffee. Evelyn laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in years. She was starting to see herself not as the woman on the couch, but as someone who could paint, travel, laugh, live. The thought of Paris loomed closer, a promise of adventure she was finally ready to embrace. But as she packed her suitcase that night, Michael's latest voicemail played in her mind. Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please, let's talk. She sat on her bed, the phone in her hand, and for the first time, she felt the urge to call back. Not to forgive. Not yet. But to listen. To see if the boy she'd raised was still there. Somewhere. Beneath the man who'd let her fade away. The day before her flight to Paris, Evelyn sat in her apartment, her suitcase packed, her passport resting on the table beside George's photo. The apartment was quiet. The kind of quiet that felt like a deep breath after years of holding it in. She'd spent the morning finalizing the trust for Lily, ensuring her granddaughter would have a safety net, no matter what happened with Michael and Claire. It felt right, like a piece of the house's legacy she could pass on without regret. Her phone buzzed, and this time, she answered. Michael's voice was hesitant, almost fragile. "Mom, you picked up." "I did," Evelyn said, her tone neutral but not cold. "What do you want to say, Michael?" There was a long pause, the kind that carried years of unspoken words. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I let Claire take over, and I didn't see what it was doing to you. The couch. God. Mom, I should have stopped it. I should have said something." Evelyn listened, her heart caught between the ache of his words and the strength she'd built. "You should have," she said. "But you didn't. And I couldn't stay there. Michael. Not like that." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't expect you to come back. I want to make it right. Can I see you? Please." She agreed to meet him at the diner, the neutral ground where she'd found her footing. When she arrived, Michael was already there, sitting in the booth where she and Lily had shared pancakes. He looked older than she remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slumped. For a moment, she saw the boy who'd spilled grape juice, scared and sorry, and her heart softened. They talked for hours, the words slow at first, then spilling out like a dam breaking. Michael admitted his mistakes, his silence, his distraction, his failure to see her. Evelyn shared her pain, her loneliness, the way the couch had felt like a prison. She told him about Paris, about the apartment, about the life she was building. He listened, really listened, for the first time in years. "I don't know how to fix this," Michael said, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "But I want to try. For you. For Lily. For me." Evelyn nodded, not ready to forgive completely, but willing to start. "It's going to take time, Michael. But I'm glad you're here." They parted with a hug, awkward but real, and a promise to talk again when she returned from Paris. As Evelyn walked back to her apartment, she felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because she'd chosen to open the door, just a crack, to the possibility of healing. The next morning, Evelyn boarded her flight, her heart pounding as the plane lifted off. Paris was everything she'd imagined and more: cobblestone streets, the scent of fresh croissants, the Eiffel Tower glowing against the night sky. She wandered the Marais, ate falafel as Tina had suggested, and stood in the Louvre, tears in her eyes as she gazed at the Mona Lisa. Each moment was hers, a gift she'd given herself. She sent Lily postcards, each one filled with stories of her adventures. She called Michael once, a short conversation that felt like a step forward. And she painted, her watercolors capturing the Seine, the cafes, the life she was discovering. When she returned home, her apartment felt different, not just a place, but a home she'd built. She invited Lily over, baking chocolate chip cookies as promised, and they watched old movies, laughing until their sides hurt. Michael came by a week later, bringing a small houseplant as a peace offering. They talked again, slowly rebuilding what had been broken. Evelyn never regretted selling the house. It had been her past, her anchor, but also her cage. By letting it go, she'd found something better herself. The couch was gone, but she was here, alive, painting, traveling, loving in her own way. And as she sat on her balcony one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, she thought of George. "I did it," she whispered. "I'm tougher than I thought." Her notebook lay open beside her, the list of dreams now a map of her life. Paris was crossed off. But there were more places to go. More things to learn. More love to give. She picked up her pen, adding one last line. Be Evelyn. Always. And for the first time in years, she knew exactly who that was.